And so if you are dealing with functions, it might be displayed in what's called function notation. Okay, function notation looks like the following. F of x. Okay, and it might be other letters from the kind of like that early part of the alphabet, early middle part of the alphabet. G of x, H of x. And all that's going to happen is that relationship is going to replace the y in an equation. Okay, so if we look at something and let's say it has the following form. Right, this form right here, y is equal to 6x plus 1. This is the form mx plus b, okay, which is called a linear function. Anytime you have a power of x that's 1, and there's no absolute value symbol, it's not in a radical, it's not in the denominator of a fraction, and so on, you have what's called a linear function. This is a form of your linear function. Okay, so what that means is because this, the power of x is a 1, that means that this equation here isn't just an equation, more specifically it's a function. There's a one-to-one relationship. Every input yields a specific output. So what we can do is we can replace this y with one of these function notations. Usually you'll choose f of x. And so this right here would be the function notation form of this equation. And now what function, or what this function notation, or the things that you need to be familiar with on function notation is how it can be represented and manipulated in your TI-89. Right? On your TI-89, function notation is going to have the following form, y1 of x. And it might be y2, y3, and so on. Okay, but that's the way that the function notation is going to look on your TI-89. So if I wanted to enter this equation on our calculator, so if you wanted to see what it looks like, you could go to your y editor. So remember the y editor is the green diamond, and then the F1 button. So green diamond F1, that takes me to my y editor. So what I can do on that is I can type in my equation into my y editor. So I'll type in 6x plus 1, hit enter. So now what you see is my y1 function represents this whole expression, 6x plus 1. Anytime that you access your function notation, whatever value is inside the parentheses here, you're going to replace all instances of that in your expression with whatever's in the parentheses. So if I was just evaluating f of x, I'm going to take 6 times some placeholder plus 1, and in every placeholder I'm going to replace it. I'm going to substitute in a number that's in my parentheses here. So in this case, it's just the x itself, right? So if I look at my home screen on my TI-89, I have my y1 function. Oops. If I go to my home screen, if I type y1 of x, what expression am I going to get? What does this refer to? y1 of x is just going to take my expression, 6 times some placeholder, plus 1, and in the placeholder it's going to plug in whatever value is here. Well, I just have an x here, so when I evaluate this, it's just going to give me that expression, right? It just repeats or spits out the output. So I hit enter and I see 6x plus 1. It confirms that that is my function in that y1 space. Okay, now, what if I wanted to evaluate f of negative 8? What if I wanted to plug in a negative 8 and find out what is the value of that f function when negative 8 is substituted in for x. If I'm going to do it by hand, what I would do is I take my equation, my expression, 6 times some placeholder plus 1, and in my placeholder I'm going to substitute in negative 8. So I get negative 48 plus 1, which is negative 47. If I'm going to use my calculator to do this, which I would encourage you all to do, we take our y function, which is y, or our f function, which is y1 of, and then in parentheses you're going to enter the value, negative 8. And that's going to evaluate it. It's going to plug a negative 8 into our expression, and it calculates your answer just like we did by hand to a negative 47. Okay, so you can use function notation to evaluate different expressions. Okay, there's a couple other ways to evaluate. Remember, there is the with key. The with key is that vertical bar. So we can use the with key to evaluate it. If we wanted, we could have typed in 6x plus 1, use our with key, x is equal to, and plug in a negative 8. If we did that, we'd still get the same value, negative 47. Okay, but this function notation is going to be more useful because pretty soon you're going to need to know a lot of information about the graphs of things, how you can evaluate them, and by just entering it in your y editor, remember we can go back and look at our graph, hit green diamond F3. So on this particular equation, I can identify the slope of it. And remember, m is our slope, b is our y-intercept. And so what's the slope of this equation here? The slope is 6. What's the y-intercept of this equation? The y-intercept is 1. By looking at the graph, what's the left and right behavior? As the graph moves to the left, does the graph go down or up? It goes down and to the left, and as the graph moves to the right, does it go down or up? Moves up and to the right. So you are going to be asked to identify those particular tendencies. Did anybody get a positive number? Negative number? If you got a negative number, you probably tried to do it manually or by hand. Okay, I want you to try to use the function notation if you can. Okay, now again, you don't necessarily have to use your calculator. I just want to make sure that you can use your calculator. So let's plug this formula or this function into our calculators. Okay, so the fact that it's expressed as g of x means that this is a function. Okay, so if we go to our y editor, green diamond F1, and I'm just going to enter it as y2. And so I'm just going to call y2 is equal to x to the power of 2 plus 2. Hit enter. So here's my function. So now I'm just keeping in the back of my mind that I express this function here as y2 of x. So now if I want to evaluate it on my TI-89 for negative 3, I'm going to evaluate y2 of negative 3. So I'm going to go to my home screen, type in y2 parentheses negative 3, and all I need to do is hit enter, and it plugs in a negative 2 everywhere there's an x in that equation and evaluates it, so I get my answer 11, and which is correct. So you should have gotten 11 for that. Now if you did this by hand, what you would do is you take your g function, you have a placeholder squared plus 2. Your placeholder is only holding a place for whatever number's inside our parentheses, negative 3. So negative 3 squared is 9, 9 plus 2 is 11. So you get the answer either way, whether it's by hand or by calculator. But again, knowing how to use your calculator is a useful thing to know, especially in this class. So I would like you to make sure you're aware of that. All right, the one last thing that I want to go through really quickly is going to come up on your homework, and then you guys will have a half hour to work. Right, and that is function notation is used anytime something has a functional relationship, meaning it has a specific output for each individual input. And so oftentimes geometric formulas will be used for this. Okay, so in order for something to be a function, it's going to have just a single variable in the expression itself. And so if you looked at something like the, let's see, volume of a sphere. Okay, so the volume of a sphere might be written in this form, and you'll see something like this on a homework assignment or homework problem. Okay, so if you know this is a function, there's a couple things regarding your TI-89. Your TI-89 can only write use the y editor in terms of x and y. So what do you think you have to replace the r with? So what you'll need to do when you enter this on your TI-89, and I'll just use y3 here, is you can write 4/3, so 4 divided by 3, times the pi button is second, then the caret symbol, times r cubed. Well, again, this only evaluates in terms of x's and y's, so we have to use an x to the third as our equation. So here we see 4/3 pi x cubed. So that is our y3, the way I've written it, expression. And I simply replace the x's for the r's. And now, what this means is that the volume of a sphere is a function of its radius. So a change in the radius is going to change the output value directly. So if I wanted to evaluate this for what is the volume when the radius is 6, all I need to do, if I entered it in my calculator, go to the home screen, y3 is the function, so I'm going to type y3, and then my placeholder is going to hold a spot for the 6, and so then it's just a matter of evaluating, and so I get 288 pi. If it asks me to do it in decimal form, I just hit the green diamond button, and you get the 904.8 as your answers.